Welcome aboard, everybody. I'm with my fantastic mate, Matty Wohlers. Matty and I flew together about 17, 18, 19 years ago for Thompson on a 767. Matty was the captain when I was we were in Indonesia for 2 months on the Hajj project, flying from Ujung Pandang up through Indonesia up to Jeddah. We had the most fantastic time. Apart from on the flight deck, our social life was just completely abundant. We used to explore everywhere in Indonesia, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. Now, for me, Matty is one of those wonderful, wonderful natural leaders who is just so self-aware, does so much to work on his inner peace, inner harmony. And we're going to talk about that today, how that benefits him and everybody else around it in terms of mindfulness and confidence. But Matty, let's just hear a little bit about your couple of minutes, just how you got into flying, a little bit of a bio. Welcome, Matty.
Thank you, Ben. You're very, very kind words. Well, I started flying in 1991. I was still at boarding school, and I joined a local flying club, a local gliding club. And unfortunately, I never soloed, but eventually I picked up flying in 92 while living in Germany. I started flying with Lufthansa, and we went off to Arizona, came back, finished the training in Germany. Fortunately, during the very dark times in 92 when there were hardly any flying jobs around, I got a job with a nice corporate company called Boeing, based in Denmark, on a beach. The beach Cheyenne 3 Alpha. Mm. And 4 months later, I was offered my jet job on the MD-80, the company called Aeroloid. I stayed with them for a good 3 years, and in 98, I had a great opportunity to join Britannia Airways. That was fantastic. I stayed with Britannia. That's where we met Ben.
Yeah.
Later, we were rebranded Thompson. In 2009, I left for New Zealand. I'm half Kiwi, so I had a fantastic time flying around New Zealand, South Pacific, and across to Australia. And in 2010, I joined Emirates. I've just come back from the UAE after spending 30.5 years with Emirates, flying around the globe, everywhere except Antarctica. I really enjoyed flying the Triple. It's a lovely aircraft. It's a beautiful, beautiful machine. The people there are very nice. You face different challenges in every flight. You have people from multiple backgrounds, cultures, and the network itself is quite interesting. So talking about leadership, Ben.
Yeah.
I have a small example that happened not so long ago on a flight from Harare to Lusaka, where the weather forecast for Lusaka was lacking. Apparently, it was all nice. Fortunately, had an experienced first officer, Italian, and a very experienced support captain, an augmenting captain. And when we got to Lusaka, there was a massive, massive thunderstorm over the field. There were 5 big thunderstorms. And eventually we held. I was the pilot flying. Because the first officer had flown all the way from Dubai via Lusaka to Harare, we decided I'd fly it back. Simple as that. So we flew on approach, and needless to say, at a very low altitude, when I wrote the safety report, it was stated 300 feet, but it was actually 39 feet. I went around. I saw some blurred runway lights, but there was so much water on the windshield and on the runway. The windshield wipers were hardly clearing them. Water I was not happy with it, and fortunate enough, all of us agreed, and later on they agreed with me, so that was a good decision to do. We went around right through some heavy rain, out of the rain, and held somewhere. And then what happened next was quite interesting, Ben, because to me it's normal. You use all the resources you have at the time. So I had a fantastic first officer with a good head on his shoulders. So I gave him the task of flying. No, you fly the aircraft. And I was liaising then with the other captain. So what do you think? What can we do? What do you reckon? In the meantime, the first officer, I told you this story already, he was flying around the airfield like a hungry fox trying to get into the hen house, looking for opportunity to get the aeroplane in. Now, unfortunately, we checked both runways. Unfortunately, it took some time. And the beautiful thing about having a good crew is, Ben, is let people do their job. So I trusted him with doing the job. Didn't need to supervise him. It's very, very important. You know, when you see potential in other people, use that potential for the better of the group. We talked about this yesterday with Sir Andrew Shackleton. You know, it's quite important. So in the end, we found a spot. And for me, it was important that all three of us would agree that it's safe to fly the approach and the missed approach, because that was the issue.
Yes.
And so it has to be clear. So we all three agreed, and then we flew the approach, RMP approach, and landed on the opposite runway and landed, and then I waited out the thunderstorm and then continued the journey later on to Dubai. So the moral of the story is very simple, Ben. It's be aware of your team, the ability of your team, your surroundings, and use them to the better for the group, and let them do their job. Do not interfere too much or at all.
That's absolutely bang on. That's exactly what I learned from flying with you, is that you created this atmosphere of complete openness and trust, very relaxed. And it meant that I found the very best in myself in a new environment on an aeroplane I hadn't got much experience on. There was just never a question of the fact that you trusted me, and it helped me to discover my potential. And I think that's really, in my mind, what leadership is about. Is
thank you. You want to elaborate on that event? It was quite special, wasn't it?
Talk about it. Yeah, it involved a crash of an airplane. Fortunately, it wasn't ours, but go for it.
No, you go. It'd be interesting to hear from your side.
Well, I just remember that we were coming in and we got radioed that there'd been a crash off the side of the runway, a local, I think it was a 737.
Yeah.
And we had to make that decision as to whether we wanted to continue into the airport or go somewhere else. And you didn't even think about overruling any of us on the flight deck, the rest of the two of us. And you said, what do you think, guys? And it gave me the responsibility. I was flying. Okay, well, let's crack on. Let's do it. It'll be interesting experience. And away we went. And it was, well, you tell the rest of the story. You have a better long-term memory than I do, for sure.
Oh, yes. No, you did really well, Ben. So we were back in Jeddah and received a phone call saying, we have a problem. There was ops ringing from Ujung. So what's the problem? So there's a Matty, which 737 crashed on the runway. Fortunately, nobody was severely injured. That's very good. However, the aircraft was wrecked on the runway. They couldn't move it. So I remember telling them, don't worry, mate, we got fuel for Australia. And off we went. Keep us updated. And off we went, and we made up a plan. and you were flying it. And I said to you, Ben, if you don't like it, don't fly the approach, don't land. We go to Bali. And you decided that we were comfortable. You were comfortable to fly the approach and land the aeroplane safely, which you did really well. It's not just us. There was a whole background, op staff, engineering, performance engineers. Since the aircraft was still on the runway, they had to create a new approach and a new safe minima, safe altitude we can descend down to, and then fly a missed approach without jeopardizing the safety of the aircraft. They had to be calculated. So, as you mentioned a couple of days ago, Ben, it's not just us. People see aviation as pilots and aircraft, maybe cabin crew and engineers, but actually there's a far bigger team involved. Air traffic control, support, even we talked about yesterday, the cleaners who come on board. They're all part of the bigger team. We're all part of this big team to get the journey done safely.
Completely. That's something I talk a lot about in my previous podcast, and it's one of the things that was really reconfirmed when I flew with you. It's having that expansive capacity to think of every link that comes in. I think once you, like me, do an awful lot of inner work on yourself, which we're going to talk about. You really big into free diving, holding your breath for incredibly long periods of time, mindfulness, living in the moment, non-judgment. But I put that your capacity to consider everybody and everything around down to that hard work that you put on your inside. And you came from a troubled background where you were fostered. And I think you fortunately had some brilliant foster parents who instilled, as we've talked about, some great qualities of humility and things like that. And I think that's why I've seen you as one of the best leaders I've come across. Again, it's the bucket of capacity. If we work on ourselves inside and trying to establish our feelings, our emotions, and put some language towards it, the emotional intelligence, then we have such a greater capacity to develop our social intelligence. I call it spiritual, but it's social intelligence. We bear in mind everybody else around us. And as you say, resources, it's about using all the resources. And it's really interesting that I think people are not working on their inner side so much, their emotional and social intelligence. And as a result, they miss so much of the resource that's available to them. And of course, in an aeroplane, we are focusing on what on this successful mission. And it really helps me to consider what resources are available. It's helped me learn how to develop my inner side as well.
It's interesting what you're saying, Ben. It's basically, it comes down to self-awareness.
Yes.
Be aware of your limitations and find a solution. If you cannot crack the nut, find somebody to do it for you. And then shared rather than take it for yourself.
Yeah.
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 That's what teamwork is all about. You work together in a team. So hang on, I just lost the thread, Ben.
That's okay. That's okay. Awareness. This is where it all starts from, isn't it?
Yeah, it's self-awareness and having great role models. I think we all have role models in our lives. And I was fortunate to have a great role model in my foster father, Oliver. So then later on, when you move on, you meet more people and you think, oh, I like this, or you read books about peoples like Ernest Shackle and Douglas Bader and so forth, Captain James Cook. They're all role models in my life. And you go cherry picking. You go, I like this, I like that, I like the other. And then you form your own style.
That's a very good message. So tell us about the values that Oliver instilled upon you as a teenager, because before your double-digit years, things were very chaotic and very uncertain for you
that's right.
And your brother. So, yeah.
Well, above all, Oliver was about fairness and honesty. That's very, very important. discipline, work ethics, finish the job before you do something pleasurable. For instance, the weekends we had to do the garden with a huge vegetable garden, all organic, was great actually. We hated it. We hated. But in the end, later on, looking back, I long for a garden. I don't have a garden at the moment, but I would love to have a garden. To get your fresh food out of the garden is something special. It's something really, really nice. So finish the job and then go and play football. So sometimes it was tough because we were members of a football team, and I was goalie, for instance, goalkeeper, and I had to make sure that I be there in time to perform. Yet I had to also do some gardening work in the morning, So it's quite good. So that was Oliver. Yeah, it's maybe. But no, there are a lot of positive memories I have. Some of them are not so positive, but all in all, they're very, very positive. So I said, it's on top of integrity is another one, quite important.
I think what I get from that is your we talk about this a lot, curiosity, of understanding, trying to understand from a very deeper holistic level what's going on and how we can take something of value out of it. So it's the idea of the creator versus the victim. We can live in the past or we can learn from the past. Simple as that. Self-awareness is key to that. Having the language to be able to talk about it, finding those peaceful, harmonious occasions when we give ourselves the mindful time to process and give ourselves the feedback, ask for feedback, not be afraid to go and talk to people. I think there's a great fear in a lot of people, particularly men, of asking for help. One of the big signs of confidence is to say, I'm struggling here, I'm going to go and ask for help, because men's value is often centered around the idea of advising and coming up with a solution. And that's a precarious position of avoiding, again, the resources around. So yeah, curiosity is a fascinating thing.
Curiosity is something we all probably have read Peter Pan or watched Peter Pan, and various remakes. And there was one with Robin Williams where he plays the old Pan. And the moral of the story is, do not lose curiosity. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Explore. Enjoy. That's quite important.
That's absolutely. So making mistakes is something that we all are inclined, I think, through the way we're socialized and society's conditioning. We still have this problem with making mistakes. We still have this problem with failure not being acceptable, and it leads to dishonesty. Oliver instilled one of those qualities strictly in you. And if we can't admit to our mistakes and admit that we're just human like everybody else, then we become dishonest. We start telling ourselves stories. We start manipulating our own mind, finding all the evidence, confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance. I'm too ashamed of this. This cannot be right. So I'm going to find every reason to negate it and find something that suits staying in the comfort zone, even if in the long term, that's definitely not a comfort zone. So we have to be brutally honest with ourselves and understand that feeling, that initial feeling of all the cortisols, the stress drug knocking around the brain is not something to shy away from, it's to learn from.
Ben, I completely agree with you. I would go even further. The main problem is not, it's the main problem certainly in society amongst men, I think globally, I've flown globally, I met many people, is that people are so concerned about their image. Because when you are a little boy, you don't care about your image. You wake up, the sun shines, and you are happy. You cannot wait to get dressed, have breakfast. Fortunately, let's say it's a day off, you don't have to go to school, and out you run. And you go beyond these fields. There's a fantastic tree you want to climb. You climb the tree, and you're really happy. And you fall out the tree. Fortunately, you are not injured, and you climb up again. You're not concerned about your friends who are there with you, that they will think that you are a poor climber, that you fell out the tree. No, you're not. But later on, when you walk through society, this idea that everybody is judging you, and I think it starts at school where the peer pressure kicks in, that you have to perform, you have to pass the grades. It's all about looking good, having good grades, and get recognized. You only get recognition if you perform. You don't get recognition for the person you are. With children, they just recognize you. If you perform, that's a plus. Where when you're at school, the system is geared up to put a value on you according to your performance. And you carry that through university, or I didn't go to university, I went to flying school, and Lufthansa was pretty tough. If you didn't pass the screening, you were on the way back. So then later on in our job, we get, as pilots, screened every 6 months. I just recently had knee surgery, and I had a very long chat with the doctor, the professor. He said what he tried to create is a quality control system like we have in aviation, where the doctors, like pilots, should go through a examination every 6 months. And that's pushed back by the medical profession in the States. He's now in the Middle East. Even in the Middle East, they push it back. There's this fear of potentially making mistakes. We all make mistakes. We know that, Ben, when we fly. That's why we have 2 of us, or sometimes 3 or 4, sitting on the flight deck. And hopefully our colleague, a co-pilot or captain, picks it up and rectifies it. And we move on, persevere, you know? So this fear of being judged, of not performing, is so big that people blend it over with a big car, a trophy this, a trophy that. Dare I say, a trophy wife, trophy house. It all comes with a price, and that's all down to being afraid what people think of you. So when you do flying like us as a professional on the flight deck, away from the training system, out of the simulator, I think over the last 20 years, the last 2 decades, the CRM has changed, the people have changed for the better. And people admit making mistakes. People don't get judged for making mistakes. And when we go on to freediving sounds dangerous, extreme. Now that's because the media pumps out to be extreme and dangerous, but actually very safe. Freediving is an environment where you dive holding your breath underwater on a single breath. And there is no room for errors.
No.
You can't make an error. you have to be brutally honest with yourself, and you also live in the moment. That's the positive side. But there is no such thing as ego. There is the odd person coming in. I had it actually a couple of times where I was supposed to, I call it babysitting, people with a big ego. And you know straight away who these people are. It's when you meet up in the morning, it's their mannerism, it's their talk. And you go, okay, I have to look after these guys. And normally our captain will come to you, or another friend of mine said, could you please keep an eye on XYZ? And said, okay. and these people endanger other people. They sometimes push themselves too far. Fortunately, never happens with me. Or they end up very quickly on the boat. You know? So this is quite interesting. When we are, as I said before, we're working in an environment, in a work environment where we see less and less big egos, and more people like you and I admitting their mistakes, being open to their mistakes. We don't judge anybody else for making mistakes. I
think that's
rectify them. And move on. Resilience is very, very important.
It's the key. Resilience is key. It's grit. It's learning how to make mistakes in a confident way. I think that's something that the younger generation is struggling with a little bit now, because we have an overly safetyism, from what I understand, has gripped people to think that making mistakes is just not acceptable. But it doesn't lead to creativity and innovation. And we are protected, going back to the aeroplane, we are protected by a lot of resources, not only each other, hopefully without the ego, but the openness and honesty and the confidence to admit mistakes, and the confidence to say something when something's appropriate, and keep our mouths shut, not trying to prove, please, perform, all the P's, which you were talking about in the freediving world. You get people coming in with the egos. They're effectively trying to prove themselves valuable enough because they live in fear. In an aeroplane, I talk about keeping it in the greens. The reason for that is we have a monitoring system on the flight deck that tells us it's all quiet and all smooth and nice. But as soon as something is starting to go wrong, we have the amber messages come up, the flashing comes up. It gives us an indication of where the problems are. We go through a checklist to establish if we can do something, what we can do, what the implications are. And then if it hits the red, then we need to really get going, because there's potential serious damage of the airplane or loss of life involved in that. So it's a monitoring system. It's the awareness. It comes back to that self-awareness thing. And talking about the school conditioning, I agree with that. I think I'm into Alfred Adler now, who was part of the Vienna psychology set with Sigmund Freud. But he talked about the fact that it's a winning and losing culture, is that if you don't perform, then you've lost and you're not good enough. So self-consciousness starts to come in at that stage. Then it starts to accelerate when we hit the teenage years, when we need to become aware that we have to take responsibility for our community. We have to take responsibility to be the protector, to be the provider. We can't hide behind our mum and dad's coattails anymore. And as a result, we get a lot more cortisol kicking in, the stress drug, to get us to move. We also have the oxytocin kicking in, saying you need to bond, you need to get together as a community, you need to fall in love in order to procreate. But so you've got this mixture of neurochemicals that come in. Conditioning, it's not good enough if you don't perform. You might get rejected by your crew members, your teenage friends, and you might have your heart broken. And I think what we need to do is encourage people to face up to their self-consciousness, because that is the key. Once we break the self-consciousness, we start to look from the inside rather than the outside. We're not living according to someone else's expectations and getting the car just to get the sticking plaster for a broken bone. It's so incredibly unhealthy, and the statistics are now so much in terms of depression, anxiety, all the way down to suicide. We need to address the modern culture in a different way, and I think the whole black box thinking idea that Matthew Said talks about was what we've both been talking about here is that you're actually forced to have a look at the data, the actual technical data, as well as our voice data. And that is, he talks about the fact that that's still lacking in the medical world and the criminal justice system, as your professor friend has already indicated. So in a way, our industry requires us to be the leaders to change the way that humanity thinks about themselves.
I agree with you, and we are forced to do that. Essentially, you and I, cavemen, everybody, we haven't been so long ago out of the cage, we're out of the jungle. And our only chance of survival was to work in a team, work in a group. And you weren't outcast if you didn't kill the mammoth and only brought back a rabbit. You still contributed. You're still a valued member in society, of society. So I think what our job can teach is, because we're confronted with, number one, we don't belong into the air. We don't belong in the air. It's like freediving. We don't belong underwater. But we make it work. Man created a machine that allows us to fly. So you said that quite interestingly. You have to be flexible. The wings have to be flexible, otherwise they break off. They're rigid, they break off and fall out the sky. We go up to high altitudes, we need a pressurized chamber, otherwise we will die. We can't breathe. We have to keep propulsion going, otherwise there's no lift, fall out the sky. So all that all was created, and you pointed out that we should be grateful to Leonardo da Vinci, who had all these ideas, and so many others, creating this machine which allows us to make the world a smaller place, to connect people, to do things we couldn't do 150 years ago. But in order to operate this machine safely in a quite hostile environment at 40, how do you fly, Ben? 45?
Maximum 51,000, but I've only been up to 49. But yeah, right round about 43, 45,000.
It's a hostile environment. You're protected by a man-made machine from this hostile environment. So there is very little room for error. Think of a rapid decompression. You have less than 3 seconds. If you don't do the right thing, you will die. So you are actually faced with real threats, real hazards, and you have to overcome them. And what I call Mickey Mouse behavior, ego, posturing, lying, self-denial, bullying has no room up there. No space whatsoever, because we have to perform a very serious job. We take it quite relaxed because we're used to it. But if you take a novice and say, you fly the aeroplane at 51,000 feet from A to B, they will freak out if we tell them about all the threats, what can go wrong. So what we learned over the years, and we've been flying for over 2 decades as well, is it's okay to make a mistake. It's not an issue. Admit your mistakes and move on. It doesn't make you a lesser person. And that is the message, I think, that has to come down to somebody who sits in an office. If he makes a mistake, all right, that may have a financial input, but it will not necessarily kill somebody. Now, so by not being exposed to the potential threats, I understand why these people live in their cocoon, live in their show world on stage. Because of stage, you come into work, you have the latest this, the latest that, compensate with material goods. Oh yeah, I got the latest car. Look at this. I've been holiday here. Look at me. Look at there. It's irrelevant, you say. So freediving, as I mentioned earlier, is similar. I have friends who go down really, really deep. There is no room for error. They don't have to prove anything. They are who they are. So you and I, we had great teachers in Britannia, former Red Arrows. Again, great role models. They didn't need to prove anything. They were very comfortable within their own skin, and that radiated out.
Yes. Yeah. That's vibration, the law of sympathetic resonance that I talk about. If you put two violins next to each other and you pluck the string on one, it resonates on the other string. Our moods, the way we feel about ourselves, do radiate from the inside out. And I think that's absolutely right. Absolutely
good vibrations. Right. The Beach Boys song, Good Vibrations.
Great song, isn't it? It's a
great song. You should sing it to the old folks home.
That's a very good idea. They probably recognise that because that was 60s, I think, wasn't it? I will take that.
Good Vibration is such a good song.
Isn't it? Yeah. Isn't it just? Yeah, I think so. Your freediving has always fascinated me. The fact that you put yourself clearly outside the comfort zone, but you don't do it recklessly. You find the mentors and the instructors and the coaches to support you there. Hopefully the ones that aren't trying to prove themselves, because it really is a life and death situation, but giving you such reward, not an ego boost of aren't I bloody brilliant and I'm going to go and show off to other people. And you told me the story recently of you going to, ridiculous depths. Let's talk about limitations actually, because you mentioned that you had a coach who you talked to and she asked you what your limitations were and you set them. Tell us that story.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very interesting story. I was fortunate enough to attend a weekend with the then girlfriend of the world champion, Alexei Mariana, who's also a psychologist. It's a beautiful, beautiful person. So she asked me and others, what are your goals in freediving? And I said, well, I want to dive 50 meters deep. I want to dive 100 meters straight underwater, so 2 Olympic pool length. And I want to hold my breath for 5 minutes. Then we did the training for the whole weekend. It was really, really nice. And it involved various yoga sessions and other sessions and some pool diving as well. And at the end of the session, she said to me, you have no limits. I was surprised and said, what do you mean? She said to me, I observed you in the water. You have no limits. You set yourself your limits in your mind, but you actually have the potential to go far beyond. And I think we do that with so much. It's going outside your comfort zone that we are sometimes too humble or don't even are able to imagine that we can climb that, as children, climb that big tree and go all the way to the top. See, because at some stage, somebody told you, oh, you can't do that. You cannot climb the tree. It's too dangerous. No, you don't have the potential. You can't do that. And for us as mature grown-ups, we have to overcome those negative inputs and listen to yourself. And I was fortunate, I was able to listen to this beautiful woman who told me, yeah, you can go on. So what I did, I actually went beyond. I haven't cracked the 50 meters yet, but that was because of a sinus issue. But I'm working on that nearly every day, and one day I will.
That's brilliant. Imagination, Einstein said, imagination is everything. It's the preview to life's coming attractions. When we're a kid, what you were suggesting earlier, when we're a kid, we have such an open imagination. We're not restricted by the self-consciousness and the layers of onions of our experience that have gone wrong, the fear-based issues that restrict all of us. We have a complete open imagination, and we're not governed by limiting beliefs. I call them little bastards.
Little bastards. Yes.
Yeah, when Mariana was talking about that, we have this choice. We only choose to live by these limiting beliefs. We also have a choice to get rid of them. And I'm starting to coin these ideas and fly away in a UFO. Rid of the little bastards, you go for the little beauties, and then you fly away in a UFO, which stands for unlimited, fabulous opportunities.
Absolutely.
That was part one of my fantastic conversation with Matty on the subject of leadership and inner harmony in terms of building confidence and a healthy, positive, creative mindset. As so often, I find it difficult to cut these podcasts short because the conversation is just so enlivening and enlightening. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on part 2 with Matty Wohlers next week. In the meantime, I wish you all the very best, and please remember to keep it in the greens.